Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is Alex, and I have not read any of Ennis and Dillon's Preacher.
And my name is Nick, and I have read all of Ennis and Dillon's Preacher.
Today we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 4 of the AMC series titled Search and Rescue. While we will not be spoiling any of the comic and by extension any future plotlines of the show, we will be discussing the details of the series through Season 4, Episode 4, so pause this and go catch up before you listen to the rest of our episode. You can find more episodes of our podcast at g2tpodcast.com. We're also on G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can send feedback to g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our podcast and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on our show. Send us corrections, observations, anything regarding Preacher or our podcasts. If you enjoy the show or any other show on the Midwest Podcast Network, please consider heading over to mpn.bz/Patreon and pledge as little as $1 a month to make our network even better. Special thanks to Jason K. and Gojo, who have pledged at the level of $10+ per month. So we did get some feedback this week. Anne wrote in once again to let us know about, she had a few thoughts about our Episode 3 podcast. She said, "Hi guys, thanks for an interesting Episode 3 podcast and the myriad of entertaining topics you covered. Homes Depot killed me." You're welcome. It might be the most proud I've been of a joke that I've made on a podcast before, other than Vin Diesel using his soul to portray a lightsaber in Star Wars. But other than that, let's see. Anne says, I also was wondering why Cassidy feels that he needs to be tortured. Could it partially stem from his love for Tulip? Maybe feeling that he doesn't deserve her because of what he is and what he's done with his life, and both of them deceiving Jesse. I'm hopeful for him, though. We see him in Episode 2, future Cassidy in the hotel room with Tulip, as a lighter person both physically with bleached hair and emotionally in the beautiful, expressive way he tells the Patrick Murphy story to Tulip. The way he adds to the story with the use of his eyes and beaming, incredulous smiles is masterful acting by Joe Gilgun, in my opinion, calling to mind the rich Irish tradition of storytelling. It's such a simple but special scene. Tulip's expression while listening to and watching Cassidy was so tender and sweet. I liked seeing them together for that brief moment of happiness. I'll pause there. That was what mostly caught me off guard in that first. That's actually at the beginning of Episode 1, I think, is that little flash forward there. Their relationship seems to have changed a lot, and I think we're right in the middle of seeing where that's going, with this whole her there to rescue him kind of thing. He was very happy this week that he saw her there and that she was trying to rescue him. So it sounds like it looks like their dynamic is in the middle of changing quite a bit, and I think we're seeing that. I also kind of am curious about his bleached hair and the fact that he was just carried off by an angel in this episode. So there's something weird afoot. I don't know. There was part of me that thought when he attacked or killed the angel in this episode, was he going to absorb some type of heavenly power, which would literally lighten his hair and.
That's interesting.
But that didn't seem to happen, so
yeah,
we shall see, I suppose.
I hadn't really thought about that before. That's why his hair was bleached. It might have something to do with that. I like that though. Was that a book thing at all? Bleached Cassidy hair? No. Interesting. He just wanted to have blonde hair, I guess. Well, maybe it was reshoots. I think he might be onto something. They hoped no one would notice.
But no,
that scene was incredible though, for sure. I mean, the whole cast is so good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing. We can't praise enough how talented they all are and how committed they all are. But he is probably the standout.
Yeah. If there's anything we continually have come back to, it's been Joe Gilgun as Cassidy.
Oh, yeah.
Say what you will about the adaptation of Cassidy, he's doing a good job of portraying a character that is compelling.
Oh yeah.
So. Yeah,
I will have to revisit that depending on where the series lands with Cassidy.
For sure. I assume it'll be a topic in a season 4/season finale, series finale, series recap thing. So
absolutely, should start making a list.
Yes.
Any listeners who want to hear us touch on certain topics too.
Yeah,
and in our we were deliberating whether or not we should do a season 4 recap and a series recap, or just kind of roll them
One
together.
big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't really have the time to rewatch 3 seasons.
There's
of
a
this.
baby and a wedding in the midst.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're on a little bit of a timer.
Exactly.
We shall see.
Unless you're cool with waiting like a year for it.
Yeah.
When we just segue into the
when
boys.
our Patreon hits. No, I'm just kidding.
That's a great motivator.
Anne went on to say in her email, Nick, sadly/luckily, I was never exposed to Malort. I did enjoy reading up on it, though.
Oh, you have heard of it, though.
She said, I highly recommend reading the, quote, reputation rests on bitter taste section of Jepson's Malort Wikipedia page, specifically the colorful and very funny descriptions of its unique unique flavor in paragraphs 1 and 3, and whether you agree. Did you read it or no?
I've read it before. Well, after I had it for that first experience, I was so fascinated by it that I started doing more reading about it online.
Yeah.
And like their marketing is like they know.
Yeah.
It was founded by I forgot his name. Somebody Jepson from like is it Swedish or
Carl Jepson Company.
Yeah. I can't remember if he was Swedish or Danish.
Malort is the Swedish word for wormwood.
Okay. So yeah, Swedish. But like today, Malort only had one real employee.
Yeah.
It was like the woman who owns it, and she had like no other employees because they only sell it in like Chicago.
Yeah.
And it's very small batches, but they still maintained it. Well, some guy was so fascinated by it that he started making like posters. He started making like materials like marketing Malort just kind of for fun.
Yeah.
And he got like a cease and desist from
from the woman.
From the woman
who was like,
from Malort.
I don't want this.
Yes. and I guess she looked into suing him.
Yeah.
And found that it was too expensive to sue him, so she hired him instead. And now
hired him to not make promotional material.
No, to work for them.
Interesting.
And so I think Malort has 2 employees now. I think he's the other one. At least at the time that I read up on that, which was probably like 2 years ago at this point.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was the funniest story. But I saw this T-shirt that they make that says Malort, but it's in like the Metallica font. It's so sweet.
That's beautiful.
I saw that. I was like, that is the shit. Like if I had discovered Malort when I was still like 21, I would have bought that shirt 100%.
Oh yeah,
because I'm a huge Metallica fan, and I was like, that's so sweet.
The Wikipedia article shows John Hodgman's opinion of Malort. He says, "quote It tastes like pencil shavings and heartbreak."
Yes,
which. That's beautiful.
And that's just the first layer.
Yeah.
What I prefaced everybody with, and the thing is, I can't pretend that I have some deep, rich history with Malort. It's not something I've been drinking for a decade.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take that long to become pretty opinionated about it. But when I brought that half bottle up north with my wife's family, I told like all the guys, I was like, you got to try this. And they were like, why? And I was like, because it's the worst. And you're going to love it.
We will bond over this.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like a rite of passage,
yep.
sort of. And then you belong to like a fraternity of people that have tried Malort and
yep.
then and maybe even had fun while you were doing it. It reminds me of an old Jeff Foxworthy joke where he talks about like to him like one of the fundamental differences between men and women is that when women smell something bad, they're like, oh, and they go get like some Glade or Febreze and they try to fix it. And guys smell something bad and they go get their friends like, come here, you got to smell this. This is unbelievable. 100% true.
Yep.
That's the way Malort is. But I told all the guys right before they tried it, like as they were trying it, and it was so funny. We like passed the bottle, and like everybody was like, and we were watching everyone's reaction down the line.
Yep.
It was so funny. I was like, it's like a gobstopper of flavor. Like it only gets worse. It's like your own Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna sip it initially and be like, oh, that's gross, but not the worst. And then you'll hand the bottle off. And then give it like 15 to 30 seconds, and the taste evolves in your mouth, and you're like, "Oh, this is getting worse," and it just gets worse.
I remember,
and you can't wash it out.
when we first tried it,
yeah.
at Tim's party, I think I had that taste in my mouth for quite a while, like
oh yeah,
at least 45. Not even like I didn't even try to wash it out with anything. Is the thing.
Yeah,
I took a shot of it and was like, no, and then I just continued to live with it, and it never gets better.
No,
it
gets
continues.
more and more leathery tasting, and it's really, it's fascinating. The only neutralizer I really found, the only thing that kind of helped was like lawnmower beer. Like cheap beer
Yep.
helps kind of mitigate it. So I did look. You can buy a bottle online now. There's like a liquor distributor in that area where you can buy one. And I was going to buy one to bring up north this year again, but like the shipping was crazy. It was like almost the cost of the bottle. So I was like, never mind. It's going to cost me $45 to get a bottle of Malort.
Of a liquor that I don't enjoy.
To get a $20 bottle of liquor that sucks. Yeah. But it is kind of fun. So at the same time, it would have been worth it. So maybe another time.
The other analogy in here that it looks like Joe Swanberg's 2013 film Drinking Buddies, which I have seen, but this is way before I had Malort, so I didn't know.
Didn't stand out.
In it, actor Jason Sudeikis riffs that Malort is like swallowing a burnt condom filled with gasoline. And then there's also
burnt is a good.
Tremaine Atkinson, founder of CH Distillery, was introduced to Malort when he first moved to Chicago. He compared it, quote, to taking a bite out of a grapefruit and then drinking a shot of gasoline.
Yeah,
I don't know if I taste any grapefruit in there.
You know what? It's kind of that sensation of grapefruit, though. If you have a really overpowering grapefruit, the way it just attacks your mouth, it is kind of that. There's that no like
citric acid. With,
there's no like single taste receptor in your mouth. It's like your whole mouth is under assault, and that's kind of the way Malort is too.
Yeah.
I recommend it. It's great. I did, I think it was at Tim's party. They said that the year the Blackhawks won the cup, like within the last 10 years, they drank Malort out of the Stanley Cup, and I was like, oh, that's so gnarly. It's so great, but also terrible to think that the Stanley Cup has had Malort sloshing around in it. It probably ate away at the a little bit of
the whatever
coating.
polish is on. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ann.
Yeah,
thank you for
Ann.
writing in. We got another email from Scott. He said, "Hi, Nick and Alex. Love your podcasts." Thank you very much.
Thanks,
he
Scott.
pluralized it. He must listen. I don't know if he listens to multiple episodes of this one or to multiple different podcasts of ours, but either way,
there's
we
a few
appreciate
to choose
it.
from.
Yes. He said, "I was intrigued by your discussion of The Wanderer by U2. It's a great song, and when I looked it up, what struck me was that the quote-unquote narrator was listed as the preacher." Here's a link to where I read that. It's the Wikipedia article of the Wanderer U2 song. So thanks for your podcast, and I'd love it if you were to do a comic reread podcast. That would be a lot of fun. Thanks, Scott from Cape Cod. We'll add that tally to the list. But no, yeah, I listened to The Wanderer again, and it's really interesting how, like, I think we did kind of tap into it of like there's this weird, like, meeting your maker is a theme and an idea that pops up in a lot of different media, Westworld, so to speak.
Oh yeah,
like it's all over the place, and to see kind of this manifestation of that in like a journey to try and find God in the form of Preacher or this U2 song, or even I joked about what if God was one of us, but just like I think it's like a very human thing of like having that higher functioning thought of like, where did we come from, and then to have it manifest itself in some type of journey, I think is pretty natural. But
oh, absolutely.
But it does lead to this like weirdly, it's like everybody operating on, like everybody has a wavelength in their brain that they hit where it's just kind of like, this is what I'm thinking about right now, and then like other people tune into it and it just becomes this thing. I don't necessarily know that I have a point in everything that I'm saying here, but I just think that like there's these weird natural phenomenon that occur, and I think this is one of them that's just kind of like meeting your maker and having a journey about it is, they go hand in hand.
It's a universal,
constant.
Yeah, it's a musing that everybody has at some point.
Yeah.
I think creation. It's in. I mean, you and I are obviously both really big sci-fi fans, and it's throughout
Prometheus,
sci-fi.
Even
Tron.
I mean, absolutely
is loaded with it.
Yeah.
Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it works so well when you really abstract it like that into something really big, and it seems so unrealistic, but yet it's a it's a reason those movies and stories are successful and people connect to them, because whether you know it or not, it's something you have probably thought about at some point in your life. And even beyond creator and creation, I think that artificial life that's one of my favorite sci-fi like concepts that it gets tackled all the time, and I generally always enjoy. It's one of the many things I love about the Blade Runner series. I don't think if I can call it a franchise, maybe, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean. It's what part of what makes that so compelling is that examination of that relationship and what putting yourself in the shoes of what each side of that equation are feeling and thinking and how they are reacting to each other and what it makes them then think about themselves. It's just and we're obviously still we're sad that Rutger Hauer is now gone, because
Yeah.
that performance helped catapult that as well into more people's mind. You think of Blade Runner, you obviously think of Harrison Ford, but you can't not think of Rutger
That
also
monologue,
and how
period.
incredible he is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really, really, really kick-ass song.
Yeah.
Not only is it really musically really cool, and it stands out in U2's catalog. I mean, it is a weird song.
It's literally the only song like that.
It's an outlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of electronically motivated stuff like that, but it's just the kind of thing where if you listen to that whole album front to back, as soon as that one kicks in, you kind of would be like, huh? And your ears kind of perk up just because there's a different energy to it. And I mean, Johnny Cash obviously double makes you raise your eyebrows like, holy shit, that's not Bono.
I was gonna say, is that literally the only non-Bono song? Is there anything that like
there
Edge
are
sings
one
on
or
his
two
own?
songs that the Edge sings, but yeah, for the most part, it's at least a member of U2, not Johnny Cash. Like it's that's part of what makes it so awesome too. Like he's perfect for it. It just really it stands out in their body of work, and I've always been really fascinated by that song. And I think it goes really hand in hand with Preacher in a really excellent way, both the show and the book.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the narrator is referred to as the preacher, so maybe it was written from this perspective of just that character. But I think to me, a lot of it reads as like what God would be saying simultaneously. There's if you go through and read the lyrics, I think that it could be either character, but I think there's a few moments that to me really speak to like the idea that God is also walking around checking things out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really cool. I'm glad a couple people actually sought it out, and whether you were already familiar with it or not, Scott, I couldn't understand if you had already been familiar with the song or discovered it because of this, but either way, I'm glad you dig it.
Yeah.
I think it's such a cool song.
Yes, absolutely.
I was trying to think of more music that we could tie in to this show. Actually, the more stuff I was listening to, I was like, but I mean, there's nothing's going to come close to that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's perfect. So, aside from that, incredibly spectacular Scottish men's choir song that happened in the finale of season 3 after the Angelville was burning and stuff. That was an incredible moment in that show, if not one of my favorite, if not my favorite.
What's going to stand out after the end?
That was
for
amazing.
Sure. All right, I think it is time to get into. We did get some Discord comments as well. Some things that we might pepper throughout the show. Both Joseph and Bruce have been talking quite a bit. I know.
I saw Mark tweeted at you and said cicada.
Yes, I did get
awesome.
several cicadas from last week, which is good. It's good to know that people.
You need a new word for this week.
Yeah, we'll see. Whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like I think.
We'll see if we need a light at the end of the tunnel of this episode. Too.
Yeah. So. All right, let's get into it. The teaser. This episode starts off back when God and Starr convened as shown in the season premiere. Starr almost had Jesse, but God says that the plan is now to make him suffer. Starr wonders what exactly it is that God wants, but God plays coy and asks how Humperdoo is doing, since he is integral to everything. Starr lies about Humperdoo since he currently has no idea where the real Humperdoo is. We learn that God has promised Starr, quote, visage pristinus, or his good looks, back if Starr does his part. As God mentions that his great design is at work, we cut to Jesse's plane falling out of the sky as God laughs. The plane crashes in the sea, and Jesse and the pilot make it out unscathed. But as they climb into a life raft, Jesse asks God if that's all he's got, and a storm starts on cue. Once again, we're hopping around, timeline-wise.
Yeah. Seems that way.
I still don't have a clear understanding of why, other than like this this conversation kind of clues off the fact that like Jesus is coming to Masada for a reason. I believe is one of the things that like maybe they didn't exactly want to tip their hand in that sense. I don't know, but what did you think about this opening? Like, what do you think about God and like we knew that they were consorting, but like we get the actual context of the conversation now. What do you think?
I think I'm learning to just let go and roll with it.
Yeah.
Assuming that we are kind of in the same boat as every character who's not God.
Yeah.
We're all at the mercy of the storyteller, so to speak, and we just kind of have to go with it. I think it's funny that Starr lies to God.
Yeah. God.
I was like, man, the arrogance on this dude that he thinks he can slip one by God is amazing.
Yeah.
He's doing quite well. Saw him this morning. It made me laugh so hard. I was like, what? Is it working? That's what I couldn't tell. Like,
yeah, does God actually know that he's lying straight to his face?
Yeah, that was very funny. I just couldn't help but laugh. I was like, whatever, that's where we're at. I really, really like now that this has turned into a legitimate performance by Mark Harlick. Like, he's actually playing God as like a character now, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Like, before it was kind of a novelty. Like, it was just like, oh, he just has to show up and be weird and abstract, and then
the God part is hair and a beard, and we get it, right?
Right.
You know, like,
yeah, initially it was just like the God doppelganger
Yep.
that they made, and then it was just God in like his weird costume and like yelling some commands during some visions and that kind of thing. But now he's actually like turned into like kind of a coy, slippery dude, and I can't figure out what his deal is. And I'm like, this is really cool. Like, I really, really like it. Initially, I was a little irritated that he was like on Earth just dealing with the Grail, or not the Grail so much as just Starr.
Yeah, directly affecting human.
Yeah, and like acting as though they're partners.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't know. And now I'm a lot more into it. I like it.
I guess my thing is that right now the only indication that I'm getting from all of this is like I currently at the moment, the way that I kind of envision it going, I don't really want this to be the idea that like God's great design is a farce, or like, especially with the verbiage that he uses here, it almost feels like we're headed towards this like, hey, guess what? God said he had a plan, but he really doesn't.
Very possible.
I don't know that that's true, but you know, the references to great design, it just kind of makes me feel as though we're on the tip of this turn that's like, hey, God's great design is this laughing stock, and you know, it's very strange. I also don't really get God's gambit with Humperdoo. Was he trying to put Starr off of his trail, distract him from the question of like, what does God really want out of this?
Yeah, potentially.
So,
or maybe Humperdoo does have some
higher
important
calling
part to play.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the few things that really is continuing to kind of reel me in and pull me forward, is wondering what God's up to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And then Starr being promised his good looks. It almost feels like a be careful what you wish for situation.
Yeah, they're definitely setting up a joke.
Yeah.
That's going to pay off at some point, I presume.
Yeah. So, I did enjoy God like touching Starr's face and head and like humming and just it was weird. It's weird. It's weird. It's a weird thing that we're viewing on TV right now.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that it exists at the very least, but like I do feel a little bit in the lurch of like, okay, where are we going here? But
yeah, what
it's not a bad thing.
What does all this mean?
Yeah. Any thoughts on like the sea landing part of the opening? I'm glad he didn't fall on his face in the desert, as I hypothesized.
The shot of God on the plane was funny.
Yes.
I enjoyed it. I was like, man, Hartlick is just going for it. And he's demonstrating. He's demonstrating quite a bit of range, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
All in one word. So trying out some new lingo, shortening it up.
It's good.
Yeah, he's all over the place with this performance, which is awesome. Like, it's a lot of fun.
Which, if I don't, I might be wrong, but I think Bruce brought up his hypothesis is that we may be looking at several instances of God.
Yeah.
And I don't quite know how that lines up as of yet. Like, there's
Meaning
almost
he's
like
in multiple places at once.
not necessarily in multiple places at once, but the idea that of like, oh, there's a good God and like a bad God, or like that type
That's right.
of
That's right.
dichotomy or something of that sort.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I think that might be a little too complex for this to get into whether or not God actually is split amongst several personalities.
Yeah, it's almost like a Greek God situation.
Yeah,
of like
it's a little
a democratization of
which is
human experience.
Yeah, which is a very interesting idea, but it does carry some. It does hold water when I think about like the God in the dog suit. I think that's what he mentioned. He's like, there's that God, and then there's this God, and that is interesting. But he is also God. He might just be able to do a lot of things and be in a lot of places at about the same time.
If he is the omnipotent,
he can also just
omnipresent.
Yes, he could just leave.
Yeah,
like, all right, Starr, and then boom, he's in the plane, or he's not even in the plane. He just is there. The idea that God is there around you, around everyone all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a fun thing to speculate on, but ultimately impossible to peg down.
Yeah. Yeah. We shall see what they show us.
I'm beginning to think a lot of what is happening this season, story-wise, is the direct result of budget. Like, all right, Jesse's going to spend this whole episode in Seth Rogen's swimming pool in a raft, and we're just going to key out the background and turn it into an endless.
We talked to Jim Cameron, and we're using the top of the tanks for Avatar.
Yes,
for our
seriously. I mean, they do that shit, right?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
You know, we'll stick him in a raft for the whole episode, and Cassidy's going to be in this cell for every episode, and Tulip's going to be in this hotel room, and like it definitely feels like they're trying to make a little go a long way. They're really trying to stretch out what they have.
Not out of the realm for AMC.
Yeah,
season 2 of The Walking Dead, for instance, like season 2 of Preacher, season 3 of Preacher. You know that,
and sometimes it works.
Yeah,
I think for the most part, all the raft stuff I really liked, and it's about all that I really liked in this episode.
Yeah,
we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just can't help but notice I see it now.
Yeah,
like before maybe it was more skillfully done, where I was not able to notice it because what was going on was so compelling that I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm down with the whole thing taking place here, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's starting to call attention to itself.
Yeah,
it's kind of like if somebody makes a mistake while they're like cooking something, they throw in a little bit of this to counteract that, and they course correct the dish, and you don't notice. But then if somebody isn't good enough to do that and they just over-salted the shit out of whatever you're eating, you're just like, oh, this is really salty.
Yeah.
And they weren't able to correct it at all. That's kind of what it feels like now. Like, you tried to cover something with something else, and now it's not working. It's not gelling.
I feel like we didn't really feel the budget until the finale of season 3.
Mm-hmm.
Was like really like the biggest like.
And even then, it was a good finale. So I don't.
So we kind of like we're
really
like
care.
Okay, you know, but
yeah.
Even Tulip's demolition derby. It was kind of one of the bigger things of like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
This scene is going on.
Hopefully
way too
they're
long.
saving up for something to happen.
They're just like, well, all right, we need this scene to be longer. What do we do? Just have to drive around in the dirt for a while.
Yeah.
And then
let's give a zany dude to react off of Featherstone and give us
Yeah, that'll make this episode meet the runtime. It reminds me of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. I feel like I've talked about this before, where they make the joke about slow motion. They're like, the episodes were coming in 8 minutes too short, so we just started shooting everything in slow motion to make the episodes longer. It's so funny.
Very good. All right, Act 1. As Cassidy is being transported to the helipad to transfer to Bensonhurst, Frankie gets held up by a recent arrival at Masada, the emissary from hell, Hitler himself. Frankie is starstruck, and Cass seizes the opportunity to break free and kill his escorts. He finally gets the upper hand on Frankie and kills him just like he said he would, by shooting him with a gun stuck up his ass, just like Oni Madden did back in the day. Jesse feverishly tries to bail water out of the raft in a torrential downpour. The pilot is extremely pessimistic about their current status, but Jesse calls their survival a miracle since they didn't take a scratch. Jesse ultimately uses the word on the pilot to force him to be positive, so he starts bailing water too. And then Cassidy calls for an elevator to find Tulip in said elevator, but unfortunately Featherstone sticks him up before they can truly be reunited. Featherstone is looking for Tulip, but Cassidy doesn't give her up. Tulip stays hidden at Cassidy's suggestion. When the elevator door closes, he gets recaptured by Grail men, and Tulip bursts out of the elevator to take on Featherstone, but she's already gone. Instead, Hoover 2 requests Tulip's assistance with the task. Toover. All right. Yeah, so one of Bruce's comments was that Frankie's death was very Ennis.
It was super Garth Ennis, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And that final shot of Cass walking away from it was basically played like a Dylan illustrated panel.
Yeah.
It's really, it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah. Would have been very tight on their faces like it was when it actually happened, and then as he walks away you get to see more of it.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, so what do you think about the death of Frankie? Like,
it feels too soon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know why. I don't.
But yeah, for
I'm not
us
that invested in Frankie.
We're kind of like, well, we want it to go somewhere, but then also to kind of be like, but Frankie's gone now. What are we gonna do? Like, know.
Yeah, it's weird because they made him much bigger than he is in the books, but at the same time, not big enough to really like necessitate. Yeah, and ultimately, I'm kind of like, well, he probably should have died in the last episode. Like, do you really need it for this long?
Yeah.
But he does die essentially at the beginning, so whatever. Yeah. He's really funny, though, when he's talking about Hitler. And he's like, whew.
Yeah, goose pimples.
Goose pimples, yeah. That's pure evil. That's, that all was very, again, the bureaucracy of heaven and hell and the Grail continues to fascinate. Like, it just was very, very funny. I can
toot my own horn and say that Hitler was indeed in town for a conference.
Yes.
And it was related to God. And,
that's right.
And so toot. But
good job.
I like Frankie. I'm not sad that he's gone. I think he kind of like, to me, Frankie's importance here was holding a bit of a mirror up to Cassidy, because Tulip and Jesse couldn't really do that.
Right.
They're too concerned with themselves mostly to like be there to examine why Cassidy is the way he is. So I think that kind of helped, and I think that served a function. But was it like super important this late in the game? Maybe not. We'll see where it goes, I guess.
His death is also a little disappointing to me because it doesn't have the same weight to it that it does in the books. Like they kind of treat Cassidy's imprisonment as kind of a joke in the show.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't kind of, they do. Like he's a foreskin machine. Or generator. It's 100% a joke.
Yeah.
And like in the comic, it's not. It's just pure sadistic behavior. Like he's just torturing him to do it until Jesse shows up. And he's also like basically blowing all of his limbs off and then letting him regrow them continuously.
Yeah.
And while he's going through what he's going through in the show does seem excruciatingly terrible, it seems worse in the book.
Yeah.
Because it's completely unmotivated. It's just a cruel person it's just a bully basically with a gun.
Frankie seems less. We don't really see Frankie like necessarily enjoying what he's doing. We know he's good at what he's doing, and he has an economic reason to do what he's doing.
He seems like he's just doing his job.
Yeah.
And he also like is right about a lot of stuff. So I think as the viewer, you're kind of put in this weird position of like, you kind of agree with a lot of his assessment, but because he is bad, you don't want to be in his corner. You don't want to agree with him. So there's definitely conflict there as the viewer to be like, he's kind of like Jody in that way. Where like he's and TC. He's right about a lot of stuff, but he's also like a bad dude. So ultimately, he is interesting in that they give him more shape.
Yeah.
But I still am kind of defaulting to the book version because his Cassie's revenge on him is so much sweeter in the book because it feels more earned.
Yeah.
And in the show, it's obviously, we like Cassidy for the most part, and we don't like seeing him get hurt. But at the same time, what he's going through is played for laughs.
Mm-hmm.
So when he kills him, it feels like it's also kind of played for a laugh and doesn't really have the...
It was Chekhov's death.
Gun.
Not even gun. I mean, technically it was, but we didn't like the Lee Enfield rifle was introduced, but even the like Chekhov's modus operandi because Cass like called a shot pretty much, right?
Yeah, that's how he's gonna kill him. Yeah, that's
but
what I said.
it just doesn't necessarily like we didn't really experience Cassidy's pain, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
And like Jesse's cut him up to ship him across the country
Yeah,
before,
that's
like
true.
yeah. So it's just very strange.
He's been mutilated before for a joke.
Yeah,
yeah.
So that's interesting.
And that does happen sometimes in the book. It's very rare though.
Yeah.
But like the whole Frankie thing in the book is like it's very nasty. It's way nastier, and it's just like it's just cruel. That's the only word I can really think of for it. Where when you take pity on like a vampire for being like picked apart in the book, like that it's doing something effective. In the show, I never really felt bad, especially because he had the opportunity to escape and he didn't.
Yep. Yeah,
multiple times.
That
now, basically
didn't help the situation at all. So
yeah, it's just weird. Like when Frankie died, I was like, well, okay,
yeah,
that's that.
Yeah. Peace out, Frankie.
Yeah, it was good. I guess good performance.
Jesse using the word to get the pilot to bail things out.
That's part of what I really like about the raft stuff in this episode is Jesse really experiences the full weight of what using the word does.
Which feels like it's something that should have happened in episode 5, right?
Of the series?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
well, yes and no, because it's not similar to this, but it kind of is. He does use the word on somebody in the book in a very horrifying way. And it comes back. It pays off again like 30 issues later. And Jesse realizes what he did is cruel and like was wrong. And he apologizes. And he's like, I didn't realize. Because I think that's kind of a human thing to do something to someone but not realize how much it affected them until maybe much later.
Yeah.
Like if you think about maybe if you were mean to some kid in high school and like you forget about it for 10 years and then something jogs your memory of that and as an adult
just cringe.
Yes. Yeah, you cringe partially because you're ashamed that you were that young and you once thought that was a normal way to behave, but you're also upset because you realize as an adult how wrong that was, you know what I mean? And that's something everybody experiences. It's just part of growing up, so to speak. And it's also part of Jesse growing up with Genesis in the book, like learning that it's not just fun and games. Like if he tells someone to shove their own foot up their ass and then they do it in the comic, that's funny. Like that's very Ennis and Dylan. And it's very Preacher in that they're making fun of something, but they're also treating it seriously because then, God, he's the master of this. Then it does come back later and it does pay off where Jesse realizes like, oh, I abused this power and it really hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for that. And he is genuinely like really remorseful. And then he, well, I don't say anything else. Whenever we do our read through, we'll get to it. And you'll be like, oh my God.
Well, and but what I'm gonna like, I guess it didn't necessarily need to be episode 5. I think there's something to be said about the fact that, Jesse gets this new toy and he starts using it all over the place. That makes sense. But like, I feel like we would have at least planted the seed earlier, or it wouldn't be this dude that we've been with for 2 episodes right now. Granted, he's great. Like, I love the pilot. He's fantastic.
What's his name? Steve?
Steve. Yeah. Yes. Steve the pilot.
Perfect.
I think this is the first time we heard his name too. Yeah. But I think that character's great and I think they do great things with him, but I also it feels a little bit weightless. Other than the horror that there is that comes with it. It feels a little bit weird that it's I still don't even believe Jesse's learned any lessons yet.
No.
Even by the end of this episode, he still blames God for it, right? he puts his body out there and starts performing the burial at sea. He sermonizes and whatnot, and then he gets eaten by sharks, and he blames God for it. And it's probably God, but he still doesn't see what of himself led to that situation.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't think
Like,
I agree, but
okay. Well,
because at that point he's learned a lesson. He's treating it like very solemnly, and then the God has to just be like, doesn't he call him an asshole?
yeah.
I think in his, I mean, it is still a joke, and there's a, I don't know. I'll have to
We'll have to see what
fleece it
happens
out a
next
little.
episode,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, we'll see if he learned a lesson or not. But I think it's still up for grabs. It's still a question.
I think he did
for
also
me.
because he's an innocent bystander. Like he's a regular guy.
Yeah.
He's a regular dude that Jesse roped into this without thinking about the long-term ramifications of it. He's like, I'll just make this guy fly me with no support crew or anything. And, you know, he does a very human thing later when he basically starts spilling his guts a little bit about, like, the bad things he's done and his regrets in life. And that, it's all very the most human behavior I think possible when you're dying or when you think you're dying is to just start talking about the things you wish you had done and the things that you did that you regret and that kind of thing. And he's one of the only normal characters in the show that Jesse has ever encountered. So I think that's also a little bit at play because he's not some crazed maniac trying to kill him. He's not some deviant that he's trying to kill. He didn't abuse anybody, or at least not that Jesse's seen. Obviously the guy says he's done bad things, but you know, that could equate to shoplifting when he was, you know, he's serving a couple years in jail.
He's not the dude running the methane plant in Anvil that's like ordering hookers and his wife is at home.
He's not Jesus Desaad. He's not Kincannon. He's not.
You're right. I guess what it is, I need to see where Jesse's at in episode 5.
I would agree.
So
yeah, I do agree.
Yeah.
And that's just why I think part of what I liked so much about it. Watching Jesse come face to face with an innocent bystander who the way Jesse treats him is kind of how Jesse thinks God is treating everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think that dynamic is kind of hopefully has
opened
his eyes a little bit. Yeah. That what he is carrying is a responsibility.
Yeah. That's very good.
That's
very good.
I liked the raft stuff a lot.
Yeah, I did too. I don't want to make it like I guess I'm just kind of like gun shy to be like, all right, maybe he learned something because I also kind of feel like it's only episode 4. Like I don't like what else are we gonna...
I'm really excited for what it could mean too when Jesse gets it under if he continues down this path and he does learn how he has to wield the word responsibly. There's nothing more fun than watching a character with extreme power learn how to harness it and then unleash it on the people who deserve it.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Yeah.
That's like the best thing about superhero movies, about anything, is just watching like Superman get his power under control and then just light up some bad guys who deserve it. It's so sweet.
Yeah.
And I hope that that's part of what makes Preacher so fun in the book when you do see Jesse
using it as a scalpel in like at least a very, you know.
Yeah, even as like a sledgehammer.
Okay.
But just aiming it in the right direction and using it with intent. It's so awesome. So hopefully we get there. But we'll see.
And then basically Tulip and Cass get to see each other. It was nice. I feel like there was more emotion between them in the way that they interacted with each other, not saying anything. Their nonverbal communication in this scene of her standing in the elevator as he's being held up feels like we haven't seen their relationship get to that point. They're crossing something that I think we've only really seen between Tulip and Jesse at this point.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of what I was talking to earlier of like we're getting to that point that we saw in the flash forward of them treating each other tenderly.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, it's we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
I still don't think I really like it.
Yeah, I don't know
but
about.
It's well done.
Yes. Yeah.
It was a good scene. Although, yeah, never mind. I was gonna say I don't believe the girl's dumb enough to just like she's there in the elevator and they don't like lean around the corner.
Yeah, there are
like,
2 guys that come up behind Cassidy. And
But
you're
at the
like,
same
why
time-
don't they see Tulip?
they are that dumb. It's the Grail.
That's true.
The most powerful organization on Earth would be completely inept. We've seen them do it many times.
Yes. And Hoover 2 obviously takes Tulip for a task that we're about to talk about. So
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Act 2, Cassidy gets locked up and realizes Tulip will keep coming after him, which is what Featherstone is relying on as she lies in wait for Tulip to come for Cass. Hoover 2 has enlisted Tulip to be a personal valet for one of the emissaries. Eventually, Tulip finds out that the emissary is Jesus Christ himself. Cassidy continues to try to break out of his shackles, and he lets the angel know the first thing he's going to do is kill him. And then, of course, finally, the sun has risen over Jesse and pilot Steve. Steve is so hopped up on positivity that he doesn't fully realize his legs are severely sunburnt. Jesse covers them up and tries to undo the word, but the pilot quickly goes into shock. Instead, Jesse decides to make him not feel pain with the word, and Jesse believes their troubles are a test from God, but the pilot asks, what if he doesn't believe in God? Jesse replies, that's okay, just believe in him. Yeah, so Cassidy and the Angel we can get to in Act 3 when things actually happen, I think, probably.
Sure.
What do you think about Jesus Christ showing up?
I was very surprised by this.
That's a non-book thing, right?
Jesus is not in the book.
Yeah. So, which is funny to me because I feel like with the way that I guess I'm coming from the context of the show, that I feel like meeting Jesus at some point isn't out of the ordinary. Like it could certainly be. We met the devil. We've met God. Why wouldn't Jesus be around somewhere? But
I think it's because Jesus died. Like I think that it surprised me because he was born and died, and so we don't expect to see him walking around. But why not?
He takes his place at the side of God, right?
Absolutely.
You know, and so if God is there, then why not
I'm
Jesus?
I'm not questioning the logic of it. I just think that's why it was surprising to be like, well, what's he doing here? He's dead. Well, wait a minute, that's stupid. Like it was probably it was probably the dumbest thought I had during watching all of Preacher. Was how's he? Oh, wait a minute.
It'll be very interesting to me to discover how the show wants to treat them and whether or not they are discrete characters, or how are they in tune with each other? Is Jesus this weird rebellious teenager to God? Like, there's a lot for us to discover here. We get kind of the indication later on that Jesus is ready to go on a road trip with Tulip to figure out where Cassidy's at, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I think it'll be a fun thing to explore potentially. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it yet, but but it's clearly very off book, right? So.
Yeah.
Any other?
We're steering further and further away from the book,
Which is weird.
With each passing episode.
So, like, how is it going to come back around? I guess is the question.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Jesus? Or
this is just the reveal of Jesus, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
The only other thing that happened in this act was the sunburn. Which looked horrific.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And the only time I could think, why isn't Jesse burning as well?
Oh, I thought the same thing. It was actually really funny. Like
Yeah.
I started laughing because that's exactly what would happen in the book. Some poor character would just get like 3rd-degree sunburns, and Jesse would just
It's
have his
fine.
sleeves rolled up, and he'd be fine. He'd be like, "I'm from Texas. This is nothing," and it would be, and you would accept it. You'd be like, "You know what? That makes sense."
Yeah.
Jesse Custer is invincible.
I think there's also some of it that's the God is clearly burning. He turned up the UV on this one guy.
Yeah. Or that guy had like a family history of
Yeah.
extreme
The
sun.
fairest skin in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is very funny, and that's one of those things that I just I got like an awesome laugh out of. I was like, of course he's fine. And like in the rainstorm, his hair's all like wet and down, and he's all soaked and shitty, and then by this part he just looks perfect
It's
again.
back to normal.
Yeah, exactly.
I just think back to the
Insider
podcast when they're like, we couldn't figure out how to work with his hair at all.
I love that when they were talking about it on the Insider podcast too, just how insanely handsome he is.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
Yep.
Where they were like, he's a 10 in a town full of like 3s. And they're talking about where they're filming.
Yeah.
And they're like, Dominic Cooper is so distracting walking around the streets of this town because he's so impossibly attractive, and everyone else here is just ugly. Is like a mutant. It was I don't remember what episode that was, but it was so funny.
Yeah.
We were talking about working with him is just ridiculous because like look at him, he's beautiful.
It was very good.
And that hair, when they couldn't figure out, they were trying to get the Jesse Custer hair from the books, and they were just like, we didn't know what the hell.
Yeah, we
to do with
couldn't.
it. Just gel it straight up and turn it into this anime thing. Yeah, the pilot's performance, I didn't talk about it beforehand. Whoever's playing him, that guy, give that guy a medal because he's so funny. The way he plays enthusiastic pilot is so good when Jesse first tells him, be optimistic. It was so funny. His delivery of everything was just so good. And then as soon as he snaps him out of it, and he looks right at his legs, and was like, oh my God. I was like laughing, but at the same time I was like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Poor guy. And Jesse, quick thinking, just shut off the pain receptors. And all right, cool.
Yeah. Ditch Davy.
Ditch?
Yes.
Awesome.
Born April 12th, 1972 in Melbourne.
In Australia, right?
Melbourne, Victoria, Australia.
Absolutely. A guy named Ditch would be Australian.
He was born as Christian Davy, but now he's Ditch Davy.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Looks like he's been in a bunch of other TV shows.
Is he in Animal Kingdom?
No. No, it looks like his biggest thing is probably Spartacus on
Right on.
like one of the Blood and Sand or whatever that Showtime.
Cool.
Whatever. Yeah.
Ditch. Yeah, he's great.
Stars.
He reminds me of Rob Delaney from Deadpool 2. Like when he was optimistic.
Yeah.
It's like, what was his character's name? Pete or something? Like
yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Oh, it was so funny. That was still one of my favorite performances.
I love
of
Rob
that
Delaney
year.
so much.
Yeah, he was hysterical. That's what he reminds me of. The mustache is also a contributing factor.
Peter was the
Peter,
name.
that's right. Yeah. What did I call him? Dave? Yeah, something like that.
There
There was a fake Twitter account for Peter after or around the time Deadpool 2 came out, and it is so funny. I don't think it's. I think it's still up there, but it's not there's not active tweets anymore. But oh my God, it was funny. It was like my favorite follow around the time that movie came out.
That's pretty good.
I did have a couple quick notes about when Cass said, "Oh, cool, back in the cell" in all caps.
Yep.
Great, Cassidy back in that stupid cell. So Bensonhurst. So I guess you were right. Unless
I don't know.
Unless there's going to be a reveal that he hadn't been to Bensonhurst yet, and he still gets there.
Yeah. No idea.
Okay, so we're nowhere further. Than
no, like I didn't. Like as we were talking about it, I was like, oh wait, so maybe he never goes to Benson. But then I was like, who knows? He gets captured again. The angel flies off with him.
Yeah, maybe the angel takes him to Bensonhurst.
Yeah, I don't know.
At this point, I'm gonna guess that he was being ferried back and forth.
Maybe it was a one-time trial thing of like, hey.
Well, maybe he went to Bensonhurst on Monday and Tuesday, and they did that. Then they brought him back to Masada for the torture class on Wednesday, Thursday, and then he had Friday off, and then Saturday they went back to Bensonhurst or something.
Yeah.
It may have just been this cycle, but based on the time Tulip spends getting in and out, it doesn't line up. It doesn't equate that he would have been flying around the world.
No. Yeah.
Whatever. We'll see.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it will never come back.
Nope.
And it's just that thread is just.
It was a foreskin joke, and
yeah, accept it, laugh or don't.
Yep. All right. In Act 3, Tulip is ever so slightly starstruck meeting Jesus when he senses she's in trouble. Here, Starr butts in to let Jesus know that Hitler has arrived. Starr almost recognizes Tulip, but Jesus throws him off the tail by asking about Humperdoo. Starr explains when the time is right, there will be a glorious introduction of Humperdoo to the world. Hoover 2 prepares the conference room for Hitler, Jesus, and Starr as Starr enters. Hoover 2 notices a languidness in Starr and offers the thought that he thinks Starr is sitting pretty, quote-unquote. A flattered Starr looks over his plans for the 2020 apocalypse when his foreskin ear sloughs off. I'm saying phrases I never knew I would say in my life.
Yeah,
thanks to Preacher.
Interesting as well.
Jesse ties a sail to the boat and gets a little movement, but ultimately the sail gets ripped off of the boat, leaving him and the pilot just as stranded as ever. The pilot is losing blood fast as his hand was bitten off by a shark. Back at Masada, Tulip tries to ditch Jesus, but he shouldn't be concerned with her. But Since she shouldn't... Wow. Back at Masada, Tulip tries to ditch Jesus since he shouldn't be concerned with her backstory, but Jesus offers his help despite the potential violence and death. Yeah, interesting that Jesus also uses Humperdoo to kind of throw Herr Starr off of the trail again. They have to know. Jesus and God have to know that Humperdoo's kind of like...
Yeah, in the wind.
Yeah. I guess by the end of this episode, we have Hitler playing piano for Humperdoo, but we never see him dance.
We don't know if it is Humperdoo.
So it's probably not the Humperdoo, right? You know,
unless Hell's people found him first, and they're going to try
back.
to use him as a bargaining chip.
Maybe. Who knows? Yeah, no, I really don't know what to think about Humperdoo, but it's fun that Tyson Ritter's like
Playing
back as
roles.
like we did get a little bit of Jesus, right, when we learned about the beginnings of Humperdoo.
Yes.
So to kind of bring him back as like an actual character who can participate in the story in normal ways.
I did not expect it. I was really surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting performance. He's not... I don't know if he would be like considered conventionally like handsome, but the way he carries himself, there is a weird allure to him. Yeah. And I was like, I kind of get it. Like it makes me appreciate the casting a lot more.
Yeah,
because you can cast someone who like looks like Jesus. That's been done, but he kind of is playing him in a very weird way. He's playing him more human than we've ever seen Jesus played, I think, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But it's also literally the only time we've seen Jesus be played in the modern age.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like Jim Caviezel in The Passion of the Christ, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's like, it's this weird... It's the same thing we're getting with God of like we don't really know the extent of their like power, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's true.
And like what does is Jesus as omnipotent and omnipresent as God is? Like we just don't know.
Featherstone doesn't seem to think so. She treats him like a figurehead.
Well, yes, absolutely. It's the same thing with Starr too. Like you said, him trying to lie to God. Like they don't.
I still can't believe that.
There's literally no respect for these authority figures. And I think it says a lot more about the Grail and the fact that they're just this power-hungry organization that, like, you know, is playing... They're the people abusing organized religion to you know, to their benefit, right?
Yeah.
But when we... Like, that's the weird thing is that you and I are sitting here like, is this God or is it God? Like it's this kind of strange. We don't know what they're doing with it yet and what the intentions are. Despite the fact that we just watched a scene of God causing the end of the Cretaceous. Yeah. So it's very weird. But I also kind of like it. Like you said, it's kind of this thing that's keeping me in it, being like, all right, who we are getting to what is the thesis of the Preacher adaptation of like what is God to these people writing this show? I think it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really like the performance of Jesus.
Yeah,
Tyson Ritter. I think it's great.
Yeah,
I like it so much more. I feel like I got more out of him as Jesus in this episode than I've gotten out of like the entirety of Frankie. Like. There was more compelling stuff I think swirling around in this episode than I've seen in the first three. But at the same time I didn't really like this episode that much, which is really interesting. I think I liked the two things. I liked the Jesus Tulip stuff actually worked really well, and the raft stuff.
Yeah.
And God at the beginning. So
yeah. Well, and it's like Bruce had a point that he said in the Discord. Let me read it here when I find it really quick. Not that quick. He said, overall, I thought episode 4 was a bit of a step up. It still has issues, but it feels more right, I guess. And that summarizes it pretty perfectly to me, too.
Yeah, I agree. I think so, because it's finally talking about the things I've been wanting it to talk about.
We found it almost feels like the season found its footing again. But who knows what episode 5 is going to bring. So
Right.
we'll see,
And
I
then
suppose.
and then we'll be halfway done with the season at
Yeah.
that point too, which is crazy.
Yeah.
When the pilot said, "What if I don't believe in God?"
Yeah.
I like when Jesse said, "Well, I wouldn't blame you for that." That was like his initial reply, and
Yeah.
that couldn't have been better. Like, essentially ripped out of the comic. It was so perfect.
Yeah.
I just loved that exchange. I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's quite good. We've also got Starr in the Sitting Pretty comment. I really don't know what to think about the Hoover 2 and Starr relationship at this point.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's just this weird, I don't know. It's building up to the joke of like Starr gets his good looks back and he still just looks like Starr, right?
Maybe.
Or is it Starr with like a fro or something? Like, what is it really going to be?
Yeah.
Is it Starr with hair and no more scars on his face? Does he just look like Pip Torrens is the question? Like,
But what does Pip Torrens look like? Starr? With 2 eyes instead?
who knows? The 2020 apocalypse plan. I think these 4 years of Preacher have been kind of weirdly encapsulated in the political climate that we're in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So it's funny that it lines up with that.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true.
But
Maybe that's why it's ending.
yeah.
We're hoping that it won't be necessary for another 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
The pilot gets his hand bit off by the shark.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, something shark related is going to happen. And if I see a shark, it's going to scare me.
I think the most we got was like a fin when he gets eaten.
Yeah,
but,
if that. Yeah, it was something. It was just bloody water and like a little bit of animation.
Yeah.
That was funny though. And he just immediately was like, "Must have bit it off, and I didn't feel it because I can't feel anything."
Yeah.
And just the look on Jesse's face, just like, "Oh, what the." Try to do something nice, and this is what happens.
And then we get a little bit more of Tulip apologizing to Jesus for lying to him about her name and everything.
I like if any of the 3 are going to deal with Jesus one-on-one, it's Tulip.
It feels the most right because of how like a religious what am I looking? Atheist is the right word. Atheist.
Did you Google that one?
Tulip feels in this show, like at least season 1 kind of felt very. She didn't respect Jesse for trying to be a preacher, you know, and so, watching her like reckon with this, like, oh, so you are a real thing.
Yeah. She seems the least likely to accept that God and Jesus are real.
Yeah.
Cassie's a vampire, so he's automatically going to be like, yeah, anything's possible.
She's also the only one that's interacted with God too. When she was revived at the beginning of season 3. So
that's true.
So the fact that she's getting most of the divine intervention head on, whereas Jesse's feeling it indirectly, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Interesting and fun.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun thing for Tulip to
It's
experience.
it's one of the only times this season where I've given a shit what Tulip is doing. Like,
Yeah.
it feels important.
Yeah.
And I dig it.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, of course it feels important. She's walking around with Jesus, but it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Works better than I kind of expected it to for some reason.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Act 4. Featherstone kills a man who wants to go to the bathroom as Jesus makes his way down to the dungeon. Jesus tries to get past Featherstone to get to Cassidy, but she absolutely will not let him through. Jesus reports back to Tulip, who decides to take matters into her own hands once again. Cassidy degloves. Thanks, autocorrect. Cassidy degloves his own hands from the shackles and crawls up the dungeon walls to kill the angel. The angel dies, but we hear the telltale whoosh of reinvigoration as the angel reappears outside of the cell and makes his way in. He grabs Cassidy and flies off out of the top of the cell. Jesse tries to console Steve the pilot as he appears to be slipping into death. Steve begs Jesse for salvation as he believes Jesse is God, and Jesse tries to use the word to keep Steve alive, but it does not work. The fact that Jesus is like I couldn't get past her.
Right, yeah.
Is great.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, like
Well, the way he carries himself initially, and then when he's in there, he seems like a bummed out kid.
yeah, he's like, it didn't work, man.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and just the very like
The notion that someone would tell Jesus no was crazy.
and they pull it off like is really funny. But like I like that you kind of Featherstone is decidedly not starstruck about it. Like she's like, oh hey Jesus, like, and it doesn't necessarily feel like she's seen him before, but she also like it feels like she doesn't care, which is funny. And to just kind of see her put on this like she knows she has to put on a persona when interacting with a heavenly deity.
Yeah,
I think it's very interesting. The reinvigoration mechanic.
100% forgot about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I was so delighted to.
Yeah, I was like, why'd he kill him? Oh,
Yeah.
as soon as I heard the whoosh, I was like, that son of a bitch.
Right.
We haven't seen that since season 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because after that, they weren't
Fiore and
reinvigorating.
DeBlanc.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
But just season 1 was loaded
or
with
season 2, because Fiore goes to kill
it's part of his shtick.
His Vegas act is killing himself.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like a bad version of the Prestige
Yeah,
going on.
but season 1 was just loaded with it.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great.
Yeah.
I wasn't like that wowed by Cassidy degloving his hands. I also was kind of like, why didn't this happen before? Why couldn't he chew his hands off like he did with his foot earlier?
Yeah.
So it kind of felt a little like he's escaped too many times at this point.
Yeah,
and I hope he
just-
doesn't have to do it again.
Yeah, I fully expect to see him back in that cell next week. At this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the constellation between Jesse and Steve. Steve literally thinking Jesse is God, I think is pretty telling. Just kind of the like people trying to comprehend. We don't stick around people enough that have been affected by the word.
Yeah.
To see them try to reckon with what's happening to them.
Sure.
So kind of reaching an endpoint with that finally was new ground to break and kind of interesting to watch.
Yeah, and again, to watch Jesse have to face the reality of what he did.
Yeah.
I hope it ends up being meaningful.
I hope so too. I do. I'm being a little pessimistic with it, I think, but
There's
we'll see.
precedent.
Yeah, yeah. All right, and we can finally get to Act 5. Tulip and Jesus head down to the dungeon to find out that Cassidy has escaped on his own. When Jesus asks Tulip what she will do when she finds Cassidy, she says she'll do whatever the hell she wants, and Jesus asks if he can join her. Jesse attempts to bury Steve, the pilot, at sea, but as he sermonizes, sharks tear apart Steve's corpse. As Jesse curses God, he hears laughter and turns around to find that he's made it to the beach in Australia. Hitler slips a Luger to a Grail guard to see Humperdoo and his talents for himself, just as the Saint and Eugene arrive at the Gulf of Mexico. The Saint heats up his revolver's hammer with his heat breath and shoots the ground to make a tunnel to the other end of the earth, where he and Eugene crawl out to find themselves at the same beach that Jesse landed at. Yeah, so we talked about Jesus and Tulip. Him wanting to join her, I think, is fun.
Yeah.
We'll see where that goes. How far away? I guess the biggest question that I'm most intrigued to find out right now is where did Cassidy end up? Right?
Yeah, for sure, because it's still daylight, right, when they fly out of there?
Yeah. So, who knows?
Yeah.
Are they just on top of Masada fighting and then he goes back into his cell or something?
Or he starts burning and the angel just drops him and he's like, sorry, and he falls back in there.
Yeah. The cruelty of Steve's body being just eaten by sharks, I think, was good. And Jesse's reaction to it. Jesse knows now that God is fucking with him.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like there's no question in his mind of, like, there has to be something at play right now.
Yes,
which I think is also something that Bruce kind of arrived at.
Yeah, the bit about the sail we didn't really talk more about, but that was very funny.
Yes.
A little glimmer of hope, and then it just gets ripped away.
Ripped right off. Yeah. Like everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Uh-huh.
Very Murphy's Law.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hitler slipping the Luger to the guard. You know, a little bit more of the funny Nazi humor
Yeah.
that we missed from season 3.
That classic Nazi humor.
Same thing with him playing the ragtime or whatever soft shoe song. Cool.
Yeah, you know, if you had told me a few years ago that I'd be sick of seeing Noah Taylor,
right?
I would be like, shut up.
Isn't that the saddest thing to come out of Preacher? Is that we're kind of like, all right, Noah, like,
that's enough.
Let's see something else. But yeah, and then the Saint and Eugene.
Okay.
You snickered at my heat breath comment because of how
why not?
Yeah.
His hell magics.
How does it feel to have traded the journey through the center of the earth for the standing at the bow of the ship with the rain?
It's a hollow trade.
I don't even know why, like you think they would be all for the like green screening that they would do to put him on the bow of a ship in the center of a storm, right? Like,
I'm assuming it has something to do with time. Just the time it would take to sail from the Gulf of, where are they? The Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah.
To Australia? It'd take a minute.
That's true.
That's
they
just
wanted to get him there quickly.
Yeah. It just was so...
I didn't even really enjoy the graphics of it happening.
How do you even talk about it?
Yeah.
How do you even begin to wrap your head around that? It's so outrageous that it defies conversation.
Yeah.
Like, what? It's a bullet hole. What'd they do?
Yes. Why was making his guns hammer hot?
Is it like, oh my God, is he Santa? Is it like the Santa Claus? His body just shrinks, and what if they don't have a chimney? His body just goes in and sucks it through like a straw.
Yes.
Oh, man.
The saint is actually Saint Nicholas.
Is Tim Allen.
Yes.
Could you imagine that?
Man. Yeah. So that's episode 4 of Preacher season 4.
It was just so... And then it ended.
Yeah, it was done.
That happened. And then it went to credits. And like when it went dark, I was like, oh, another commercial. No, that's the note we were left with.
You know what was even weird about it to me too was like it almost looked as though it was not the same. Like they basically had to put the deflated raft there to show you that it was the same beach because it looked like a completely different beach to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it also helped signify that they're hot on his tail.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I actually did
there.
like the reveal that he was just offshore. That was funny.
That was good.
Like this crash zoom back and then the Australia. I was like, that's kind of lame. Like I saw that joke coming, but at the same time, it just was really funny the way it was executed. So
yeah,
like,
what is that? What is that like indicative of? It's similar to like the ending of the Mist, right? But I feel like there's another movie or something.
You mean like if Steve had held in there for 20 more minutes, they would have made it to shore?
Well, we get the impression of like God magically deposits Jesse there.
Yeah,
right?
He just winds up at Australia.
Yeah, not necessarily that it was like.
Oh, okay. That they were there all along.
Yes.
Yeah, because they would have seen it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's well, you would hope so.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, but it does feel a little bit like the end of the Mist. Or there's another movie that I'm thinking of like, not to spoil the Mist for anybody, and I don't think it really does if you don't think about it too hard, but I feel like there's another movie where it's just like the character's waiting to get somewhere or something, and it turns out that it's just right there. It's played for a joke or something like. I'm sorry. If anybody listening might know what I could possibly be thinking of.
I'm sure that's happened more than once.
Yes, it feels like a trope.
That's kind of what happens in the Odyssey.
It might be on TV tropes.
Like
Homer
is, or not Homer. Odysseus is almost back.
Yeah.
And then he talks some shit about Zeus or whatever, right? Or he talks shit about Poseidon, or anyway, some god is like, all right, dickhead, enjoy 15 more years at sea, and they just blow him so far off course that he has no choice but to try to get back. Anyway, Yeah, it was still funny. It was a funny shot.
It
I
was.
liked
It was good. Just the way that the sound fades in and you hear the beach
it.
activities going on.
Yeah, and it's just like a fully loaded public beach.
Yeah.
And there's just... It reminded me of like a Wes Anderson shot too, the way it pulled back. And
Yeah.
the way except it would be... It reminds me of that weird zoom in The Life Aquatic when Angelica Houston is on the boat coming to rescue them. Yeah, anyway.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that same thing is so funny because it's not. It's nonsense. Like that's the ice pack
Yep.
of this show.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? No. Jesus is here, but this is too far. I refuse to accept that this worked. Because Eugene followed him somehow.
Yes.
Eugene
survived
the
the core
center
of the earth. Yes.
And is fine.
It's one of those things, like if they had really ever actually tried to give it any logical consistency, you'd be like, okay, like really? But at the same time, without having, like, especially because there's no precedent for the Saint doing anything like this.
Oh, sure.
I remember the heat breath at the end of season 3 was, you reacted the exact same way with just like, what the fuck was that? So
it definitely feels like they're, in some ways, they're on cruise control, or they're just like, you know what? It's got to happen. How does he do it? He shoots through the earth and then he comes on the other side. He rides the bullet to the other side. Cool. How do we film that? I don't know.
Yeah, it is the most Deus Ex Machina. Like, we need to
that I've ever seen.
Point A to point B. Yeah. That's a bummer.
Yeah, and it's weird because I think about, like, at the end of episode 1, the Saint and Eugene could have arrived at the Gulf. They could have just driven there, arrived at the Gulf, got on a boat. Midway through episode 3, show the shot of them on the boat. You could pay homage to the comic and at the same time explain how they're on their way. Although I guess Jesse's not in Australia yet, so they'd be going to the wrong place. And I mean, maybe I'm being a little hung up on this awesome
Even
panel
so,
from the book, but I just feel like that mechanic, you can wrap your head around that. You're like, you know what? Okay, these are the Saint's powers. This is what he can do. A, B, C, D. That's all very clear when you meet the Saint. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's what he can do.
Well, and that's the thing, is that this...
And from then on, you're like, okay, how does he get anywhere? Well, he's got to walk, he's got to ride, or he's got to take a boat or a plane. Like, that's just... But at the same time, it works because he's so unstoppable that he doesn't need any more magical abilities to do anything, because you're like, oh, shit, he's on his way. When he gets there, there's going to be a reckoning, and that's sweet.
Yeah. See, here's the thing, is if episode 2 of this show opened up with, like, a dude inside the interior of a cabin just, like, laying dead, and we just, like, pull out through this trail of bodies on this ship that we can tell is a ship swaying with the motion of the ocean or something like that, and we just kind of slowly pull out to reveal that the Saint and Eugene are standing at the bow of the boat as it's raining. We know that he's going to get to where he's going.
Yep.
And if we literally never see him again until he's there,
that's
to
fine.
Fuck shit up, because
Right.
we know that's what he's going to do.
How awesome would that be?
Yeah, and that's all you need.
Instead of, and I'm trying to think now to counter that. I'm like, okay, but was the stuff that we saw of the two of them worth it? No.
No, it wasn't.
In my
Did
opinion,
we need the sex detective's little slip in there? No. Did we need Eugene trying to humanize another almost irredeemable being?
Well, and
it was okay.
A character that doesn't need to be humanized.
Yes.
That's not his function in the story.
Yeah.
I think that it's okay. I know that there was a little counterpoint to this in the Discord that maybe humanizing these characters makes them more interesting. Yeah, maybe. But at the same time,
I think the Saint has a role to play.
Yeah,
and it works.
Not every character has to be
the Saint himself.
Not every character has to have an arc and be well-rounded and be. Not all your villains have to be sympathetic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Not all your heroes have to be perfect, or not all your heroes have to have flaws. Like, it's okay to have, I really hate to use this term, but it's okay to have one-dimensional characters
Yeah.
if they serve the story.
Yes.
Make the Saint paper thin.
Yeah.
That's fine, because you know what? It's awesome, and it works for the book.
He's literally a thing for...
Plus, we already have his motivate. We already have his story, and it was incredibly executed. That's all you need. That's all the character you need for him. He's
and it's
good.
only since been clouded for me too. Like at this point, like at the end of last season, the Saint learned that God was in the room when it was decided to torture his family.
Yep.
And why does he care about Jesse anymore?
God, you hit the nail on the head so hard.
Why? So there's no motivation there.
The thing about the Saint is he's a gun, right?
Yeah.
He's a man that was turned into a gun.
Yep.
And he was meant to be used as a gun. And what makes him compelling is when the gun gets turned around on the person who made the gun, which is what happens in the book, too.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just said. Eventually, there's a moment where the Saint also learns in the book those facts, basically. Oh, I don't want to ruin the scene for you or anybody because it's so good, so I won't.
Yeah.
But, yes, that exact question is raised, and everything changes. And it's just the best. And... yeah, why haven't we? Why isn't that
like I guess maybe I should rewatch the scene from the finale again. But like the deal was Satan wanted the Saint to go kill Jesus, and maybe he was going to give him his soul back or something like that. I don't know, and he would go to heaven. But I still don't even like. That's not. He kills Satan.
Yeah.
When he learns that God was in the room. And I feel like the Saint should only be focused on God at this point. Period. Yeah. So. Who knows?
And maybe the reveal will... let's not even speculate. I don't want to risk leading anybody down a path they're not ready to go down.
We'll see what happens.
It's weird to get so continuously hung up on this character. I feel a little ridiculous, and I hope nobody is like, oh, dude, let it go.
Well, I think they have been, but
he's one of the to a point.
But the thing is that I get some reflected glow off of you because part of my exposure to this has been learning what your expectations have been, but also the problems that you have are things that I think are pretty clearly even reflected in the show itself.
Yeah,
it is self-demonstrably stupid. They gave the Saint himself as a Deus Ex Machina for certain things to happen. Yes. He's a gun. He does things that affect the people in the story.
Yep.
To give a Deus Ex Machina to get the Deus Ex Machina to where it needs to go is so needless.
Yeah. When you put it that way, it's kind of great.
Yes, it's a funny joke, but like, no, we don't need it. No. We don't need it.
Yeah, it could have been done. And you know what? We're looking with season 4 Preacher. We're all about the bottom line.
Yeah.
We're all about trimming this budget. Uh-huh. Hey, write these characters out of the 3 episodes and just let them be on a boat somewhere. Boom.
Yep.
Now we can spend more time doing other stuff that will serve the story better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to act like we could do this better. And I'm not saying that we can, but it just feels like no one's really behind the wheel so much anymore. And somebody pointed out in the Discord, actually, I'm sorry, I can't give credit to whoever it was, that Rogan and Goldberg have not written or directed any of these episodes. I haven't seen Sam Catlin's name anywhere either.
That's the weird thing to me is like, it was Bruce. Bruce is the one that brought it up. Where's Sam Catlin at right now? Like, I don't think, let me double check.
It feels like they all hopped. This is a phenomenon that I actually just learned about recently, and maybe it's something I should have learned about sooner, but in the actual film production world, and I learned from a friend that this is apparently rampant in Atlanta of all production communities because it's not it's not as established yet, but apparently a lot of crew members will book a gig, they'll book a feature or whatever for 3 to 8 weeks, whatever, somewhere in that time frame. And then what inevitably happens when you work in that field, you're a contractor essentially, you have to start worrying about what's your next gig. And apparently it's a serious problem in Atlanta where people are booking their next gigs and they're bailing their current gig a week early to go jump on the new gig. They're hopping, and apparently this is like a serious problem. And a friend of mine who is moving to Atlanta, or just did, was describing this. He's like, yeah, there's a need for people down there because people keep
just bailing.
And then that's a short-term solution that creates a long-term problem because then no one's going to want to hire you again. You're going to be eternally working first time with people on things that don't know you yet.
Yeah.
But I was like, I kind of can't help but feel like that's what happened here. Like Rogan and Goldberg were like, oh, we get to do The Boys and we get to do it however we want it. We can make it as graphic as we want. Sweet. Who's our second in charge.
Yeah.
You're gonna finish up Preacher. Here's the story beats. We'll beat out the whole script for you, and then just oversee it and get it done.
So it looks like Sam Catlin did co-write the premiere of the season, and he did singularly write the finale.
Okay, great. You bookended it and then told somebody else.
Gave everybody else filling in
Sure.
the plot points, so.
And I don't know what else Catlin is on now. If he's on another gig,
Yeah,
if
that was
he's
the other
on The
thing.
Boys with them, or if he's on to something else. But it does feel like it has not been seen through. It's kind of like what J.J. Abrams did with Lost, actually. It's also very similar. Like he launched Lost, and he was an EP throughout, but at the same time, it's irrefutable that the dude focused on making movies.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's always kind of bent, like even with like Fringe and Lost, and
he starts things and then he walks away and does something else.
yeah. Sam Catlin doesn't have anything like in the works on IMDb, so
Yeah, whatever.
yeah.
He's on vacation.
Anyway, that's it for this week's episode.
Mm.
I have to get going. I have a hard out in 9 minutes, so we're gonna wrap it up.
Okay.
It's gonna take me 9 minutes to read the.
I
want
to talk more about the Saint of Killers. He's iconic.
Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast at g2tpodcast.com. We're also on TV Time, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. We're G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can email us at g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our podcast and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on our show. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. The Midwest Podcast Network has other shows about video games, horror movies, FX's The Alienist, and HBO's Westworld. Find out more about these shows as well as how to support the network on MidwestPodcastNetwork.com. Quick note about Westworld. Supposedly, Season 4 is going to film soon.
What?
Yeah. The Casey Bloys of HBO said they're contracted for 2 more seasons, so we may get 5 seasons of Westworld.
Okay.
But anyway. Our theme music is the song All In by The Red Thread, and it is being used under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. That's all for this episode of Gone to Texas. We can't wait to see what next week's episode of Preacher brings, but until then, go forth and speak the good word.